Hello, dear listeners and dear viewers. Welcome back to Papa-Norr Story Time. This is Papa-Norr. So far, we've done some very interesting books, and we are about to do another book. This time, we're not going to read every chapter in the book. We're going to read only 2 chapters. The first chapter will be read by the author herself in the person of Adolika Nenesoa, and yours truly, Papa-Norr, will read one other chapter. The title of the book is The Enemy of the State. The Enemy of the State. Now, this book is not like any other book that you know. The imagination of the author runs wild. She doesn't cage her imagination inside. She thinks out of the box, inside the box, out of the box, around the box. This book is very, very interesting, especially the chapters that we'll be reading, which happens to be both our favorite chapters. So, ladies and gentlemen, to read the first chapter of the book, I have for you Adolika Nenesoa. So please take your time. She's a good reader, an excellent reader. Take your time, listen to her, follow the story, and enjoy the story. You'll be amazed at her imagination and her thinking. Adolika, over to you.
Independence Day. Sewa stretched her limbs and turned leisurely in her bed. Nothing was better than no school. Her parents were in the living room, sprawled over the 4 leather-bound sofa. They were enjoying their day off, listening to the president's speech and waiting for the festive Independence Day parade to begin. The 10-year-old was left to her own devices. Sewa did not find the parade interesting. She had watched it several times before, and this year she concluded that the parade would be no different. Her little figure, huddled in a cloth, wandered through the house, past familiar pieces of furniture and pale yellow walls, until she approached a door. This door led to Sewa's grandmother's room. In it was a collection of traditional beads which the old woman kept in a beautiful hand-carved wooden box. The box had a boldly carved nyansapo on its cover, the Adinkra symbol symbolizing knowledge and wisdom. Sewa's grandmother dressed regally and often wore her beads around her neck and wrists. Sewa had long wanted to look through the beautiful bead collection, and since her grandmother was away in Mampong, this looked like the perfect opportunity to explore. Sewa touched the door lightly with her fingers. The lock was loose and the door squeaked open barely an inch. Light streamed through, luring the girl in with a strange force. Sewa peeped through the tiny opening. She could see the ochre bead box at the very top of the shelf. She walked in with small measured steps and stopped at the shelf. The box looked much bigger now that Sewa was close to it, and it was out of reach. She stretched up on her toes, arms stretched and fingers splayed to reach the topmost shelf. Then she jumped to reach the box and knocked it right off the shelf. It crashed to the ground and the beads fell out of the box. As they fell, the strings holding the beads together snapped. The beads fell to the floor and scattered in all directions. The box lay open on its side, but there was not a single bead in sight. Sewa looked down in consternation. Her intent gaze scanned the room but found nothing. The beads, she thought, must have rolled under the furniture. Sewa dropped to her knees and peered under the big bed in the room. Then she proceeded to crawl under it, and darkness engulfed her like a damp, heavy blanket. Suddenly, she heard a car. It was getting closer and closer. Sewa's limbs stiffened and she stared blindly into the darkness. A car gradually appeared out of the darkness and came to a stop. A woman got out and walked briskly away. The driver said to Sewa, "Which way are you going?" he asked. "I don't know," replied the startled girl. "I was looking for my grandmother's beads." The driver thought for a second. "I think I know where you need to go. Jump in." Sewa peered cautiously into the taxi. A little boy sat in the back. He kept sniffing and wiping his nose with his hand. A plump woman sat beside him. She was frowning. She wiped the sweat off her face with a huge yellow handkerchief. Sewa jumped in and the car sped off. Soon it came to a halt at a small taxi rank. "There," the driver pointed ahead. Sewa stared into the dim, foggy distance. "What is there?" The driver didn't reply but looked impatiently at her and then at the other people pressing their faces into the taxi's windows. Sewa pushed the door open and climbed out. She was met with a blast of cold, humid air. She stood staring ahead. Sewa picked up speed and walked in the direction the taxi driver had shown her. The road was untarred and stony. As the girl plodded on, the bushes gave way to thicker shrubs, and the shrubs in turn to something reminiscent of trees. As Sewa approached what looked like a forest, she gasped. The beautiful trees, made of amazing beads of all colors, reached down. Sewa picked up speed and walked in the direction the taxi driver had shown her. The road was untarred and stony. As the girl plodded along, the bushes gave way to thicker shrubs, and the shrubs in turn to something reminiscent of trees. As Sewa approached what looked like a forest, she gasped. Beautiful trees made of amazing beads of all colors reached to swell around her. "What are you looking for?" whispered one of the trees in her left ear. The tree bent her branches towards Sewa. "Beads, my grandmother's beads," Sewa replied, staring in awe around her. "What are you? I've never seen anything like you." "We are the bead trees of the forest, and we have been here for thousands of years. We have seen ships come and go, heard gunfire, we've heard people laugh, weep, celebrate, mourn, and towns change. But we never went away no matter what happened on this land, and for thousands of years we've always produced beads." Sewa stared at the trees in silence. She wondered about all the things they had seen and all that they had heard, all the people that had come and gone, laughed or cried, stayed or left. She grew thoughtful. Sewa stretched out her arm and touched one of the trees. The branch felt cool, damp, and sticky to the touch. Sewa recoiled and quickly pulled her hands back. Meanwhile, the whispers of the trees grew increasingly loud. Sometimes their whispers sounded like the hissing of 1,000 angry snakes, and sometimes they sounded like the trickle of cool water on hot and tired feet. "We will get you the beads," whispered a voice right behind Sewa. She turned around sharply but saw no one. "We will get you the beads," a hoarse whisper sounded right behind her left ear. Sewa turned sharply again and was startled to see a dark emptiness. Somewhere in the distance she thought she heard a child crying. Suddenly there was a deafening crash, followed by a million voices, some angry, some loud, others screaming in pain, others convulsed in laughter. Sewa shut her eyes. She heard voices speaking in languages she couldn't understand. She heard the crashing waves of the ocean and distant drums. These sounds became louder and louder. Sewa kept her hands over her face, afraid to see what was going on around her. The girl heard a crashing sound in the distance and quickly opened her eyes. She saw the trees throwing out their branches and blocking out the sun. The sun in turn looked like it was drawing closer and then suddenly pulling away in the distance till it looked like the tip of a pin. As the sun executed its fearful back and forth dance, the trees ferociously held strings of beads off their branches into the air. The trees laughed hysterically, but the little girl's face froze with terror. She quickly took to her heels and ran as fast as she could to escape the thundering sounds getting closer and closer to her. As Sewa ran, the clouds sank slowly towards the earth as if overcome by their own weight. Sewa dropped one slipper and the other snapped and flew off her foot into the billowing red dust behind her. The ground was hard and dusty. She could feel every sharp stone on the ground and it cut into her bare feet. The red soil turned thick and muddy, and the reddish-brown water rose higher and higher until it reached Sewa's ankles. It was now pitch black. Sewa couldn't see much, but she could feel bodies and smell people, smell sweat, smell urine, smell unclean breath. Strange voices cried out around her, heart-rending groans around Sewa's ears as she ran. Arms and legs of people she couldn't see were bumping into her and pushing her from side to side. Suddenly she stumbled, lurched forward, and fell flat on something hard. She felt a gentle wave of salty water splash over her face and enter her mouth. The cool water on her cheek was soothing, and she allowed it to gently lap on her cheeks and her eyes. As she lay there, something struck her feet, then another and another. Sewa covered her head with her hands to protect herself from the onslaught. Finally, there was silence. Sewa cautiously opened her eyes. All around her were strings of beads, her grandmother's beads. The young girl cautiously stretched out her hands. She felt something hard above her head, and then something soft in front of her. She grabbed whatever it was. The girl's fingers recognized the edge of a bed sheet and tugged at it. It gave way, and immediately light streamed under the bed and blinded her. She lay sprawled on the cold tiled floor and let out a sigh of relief. The cold tiles felt welcoming in their familiarity. She lay there for several minutes to calm herself down. Sewa slowly pulled herself out from under the bed, carefully dragging the beads behind her. The beads now felt unusually heavy and, like old cannonballs, resisted any pull against gravity as the child placed them with an unusual sense of caution back into the wooden bead box. Sewa heaved a sigh of relief now that the beads were back in the box. She carefully closed the nyansapo lid. She paused to wonder for a moment about what the beads had seen and what they knew. She wondered if they ever whispered to the old woman and if the old woman talked to the beads as they hung around her neck. Sewa looked up. She could hear her dog barking outside. She hadn't noticed previously. Out in the yard, the guava tree was blossoming, and the mango had numerous little yellow buds about to burst into a riot of flowers. The heat pulsating through the window was palpable. Time stood still, and 1,000 years seemed to pass by in 1 minute. The sun was shining, and it was a beautiful Independence Day.